folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. And folks, I have a new title. It was given to me by a writer, a national writer, because he came to the TexitCon conference and he said I was the leader of the Church of Crypto Jesus. And it wasn't said in a nice way. That's what I guess I'm doing. Crypto Jesus, folks, the leader of the Church of Crypto Jesus. Wow, amazing. I don't know what I've done to deserve this new title, but nevertheless, it's very entertaining. I got a call from Daniel Miller. He said, "Hey, did you see the article?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Oh yeah, you got a good one." So it was a fun thing to realize that when you're doing this work, whether it be in crypto or right side up with Steve Staggs, you know, you kind of think you're talking to a camera, you're looking at a computer screen, you're like, you don't know if there's any feedback, right? It's like yelling into a canyon. You want to hear the echo. And it's really cool. Many of you have reached out in many different ways. And I spent some time this morning with a new good friend. And it's just cool to see that this stuff it's not void, right? It's not just like, hello, is anybody out there? And it's like, yeah, I'm over here. And people are like, hey, yeah, this is helpful. And so I really appreciate that because you don't always hear that. And of course, that's what this thing is about with Steve Staggs. So let's bring him in and say hello. What's up, buddy?
Hey, dude, how you be?
I'm great. You know what I think is so cool is that, you've been journeying for a long time doing this stuff. And I almost feel like you've been bumping your head a lot too. You and I have talked so many times about just with the church and church people, and you're probably having really similar conversations with people over the years. And it's got to be cool to have some traction occasionally. And I know you've had certain people that have like been paying attention, but you said to me before, you're like, well, if you're interested, I'm willing to share, and
Yeah.
it's like, hey, Jesus, I'm interested in you. And he's willing to share. And so I appreciate the fact that you're modeling that behavior because I'm like infected with it and I love to share it too. But you're showing me a way of operating that I think is so it's effective, but it seems like it's the right way to do things. And you said right before we got on this, you said, hey, James said you should be slow to speak and quick to listen. You're like the picture of that, and I appreciate that. And that's why I think this whole thing is so different as far as a format.
Well, I appreciate that, Matt. And the one of the things I learned along the way, and it wasn't too far into it that I learned, is that the upside down world is all about imposing. It's really not interested you know, in knowing what is true. It is more interested in imposing its perception of what is true.
Hmm.
Whereas the right side up world, in the language and vocabulary of the stream here, of the kingdom of God, is more about proposing. Think about it. If a being is supreme, what is it that supreme being cannot do simply through the execution of its will? Is there anything it can't do?
Supreme.
So if it wants to impose itself on its creation, guess what it has the capacity to do?
Just that.
Just exactly that. And yet, what does that accomplish?
Right.
You haven't accomplished a thing. Where you accomplish things is proposing something that in the essence of it has great value, that the person who recognizes that value says, I want to be a part of that.
Wow. You're starting out this big, this fast, Steve? You're like coming out of the gates like, how? Okay, let me say it back to you. I'm getting this. This is big. You know what I thought of was once again the father giving the inheritance to the son
Yeah.
and saying, all right, and what happened? I mean, it's interesting you say this. This is how I process this.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, I want my money now. A proposal, right? Hey, I want my money now. Okay. All right. I'm gonna go my own way, Dad. I got this figured out. You're like, okay. And of course, in the wisdom, you talk about that supremeness. I think it's so great you're saying that, is that if you were to, and I think about of anything that we do create, and I've seen kids do this, and I probably did it as a kid too. I made something that I was really proud of, and then I ripped it up in front of someone to show them that I had, I was destroying this thing, and it
Mhm.
was an act of defiance, is what it was. And it was
Mhm.
like, I'll show you, I'll break this thing.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that you say that idea that, hey, if I impose my will on you, you're an automaton, right? I'm just, there's a controller that I direct you and you do whatever I say. That's robotic, right? That's just
Yes.
programmatic. And what you're saying is, I love this idea because it's so pregnant with possibilities, a proposal,
Yeah.
right? That's to say, hey, dad, I want to do this. And it's really interesting how that fits into relationship too, because now I think also about kind of Moses going, I don't talk so good. Can I bring my brother with me? And you think about kind of the arguments about this. Well, what about this? And I can't really do that. And what do you think about this? And there's so many scenarios in which you see that conferring, which is
Yeah.
actually interesting because you're illustrating to me, at least, that dynamic is really important, because otherwise you
Yes.
would not have the reality of this place.
Well, no, and isn't it fascinating about, Moses and that very the essence of that, which is in the concept of proposing and conferring that we've talked about before, this dialogue and exchange of ideas, this partnership of activity, that here Moses is talking about his inadequacy as a speaker when he's speaking to the supreme being. Now, wait a minute. Mo, how come you're not all worked up about talking to me and being really clear with me about what your issues are, but somehow you're kind of freaked out about going to Pharaoh
Yeah,
and
wow.
being freaked out about, being just as clear to him? Mo, would you mind explaining that to me?
That's actually a really good point. I never thought of that. That's really good. Yeah, it's like, hey, yeah, sure. Well, this is cool. You fired the gun immediately as we started this thing, which is so cool. Sam Kemp is here, but
Hello, Sam.
so check this out. So Sam was a big part of the whole Texacon thing this weekend.
Yep.
And Rags convinced him and Danny the singer to go to the blockchain summit that's in Fort Worth right now. And so
Uh-huh.
he's working for Rags. He's like, "So Rags got me working. We'll catch the rerun." I just appreciate the fact that you come in and put something in the chat. I know he's at the
Yes.
conference. The fact that you take the time out, Sam, thank you for that. And
Right
then there's
on.
this guy.
There
There's
he
this
is.
guy. The oxymoron of the day is logical faith.
There
I
you
love
go.
it. I love it. He's gonna have to step out, but that's cool. Mike Ostel, it's so great seeing you. It's like, all right, here we are again, and it's good to have you here. And humor is a good a sense of where you stand and how you're doing.
Yeah.
So
Right
appreciate that a
on.
lot. Taryn, I highly recommend people read the document "The Great Taking," which can be easily found online. Very good. That's a great
Good
reference.
tip. Good
Aaron,
tip.
thanks for being here. MT Coiner, good day. Crypto Heartbeat, Hexy Quinn, awesome to
Yes.
have you.
Yes.
Um, Big Wheel, ENT, I'm not sure what that means. What's up? So glad that you're here. I haven't seen you before. I'm glad that you're here. Um, Probably been watching on the replay and not been in the live. So glad to have you here. Crypto Pez is back. Hey, it's that time again. I love Friday evenings, bringing the unlocking of generosity to Spain.
Yeah. Right on.
That's so right on. It's so great. CryptoPets, thanks for being here. Appreciate you being here once again. I like when things fit in your timeline, right? Because to me, it's what 11 o'clock in the day, you and me, and it's like there's people are like, "Oh, yeah, I just finished up a meal or whatever," and this is kind of perfect timing. It's like prime time. We're on prime time in Spain.
There you go.
So awesome. Bearded Saint, awesome. Tank Crypto, morning, gents. Good to see you. Cadium is here.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, Cadium, of course. Look out for that Steve guy. Um, so it was funny. So John Balagiano, I don't know how to say his name without like sounding Italian. John Balagiano is he's with the TNM, and he's my buddy. I think I'm not sure. I mean, he's in his 70s, and It was so awesome. We had one of those conversations, Steve, like you and Kadium had, just about those good old days. I was looking at him. He was staring at me kind of weird across the table, and I said, "Were you a hippie?" He goes, "Yes, sir, I
Yeah,
was."
that's right.
It was awesome. It was an awesome thing. Crypto Ethos, good morning, fam. Our God is doing so many things right now. And that is so
Yeah,
true. And it seems like it's like in Technicolor, foundations built on sand are being shaken. That whole idea of shaking the heavens and the earth, like I see it everywhere as well.
yes, yes.
Um, and then Hornet UK one with manifestation. Do you think we create reality or just attract what is already in the universe? You know what's so interesting about that, Hornet UK? I'm interested in all the scientific stuff and and see how that stuff merges together. And I'm curious what you think about this, Steve, as well. You know, there's a guy who they considered him to be the smartest, the highest IQ of anyone in the United States. And he was a self-taught guy, blue collar. Um, and he's come up with a theory of everything. And of course, you
Hmm.
probably know the theory of everything. What people think about it, it's called the TOE,
Yeah,
is is really fundamentally in physics related to electromagnetism and gravity, and basically kind of squaring the circle of Einstein.
yeah,
This guy basically stopped and he said, "Hold on, no, 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 it's not about that." And my camera freezes up on me occasionally here, and he says, "You have to back up from this because you have to understand that it's all a language." And he literally starts from God, and he
yeah,
actually has an acronym for what God means in his theory, but it is the supreme being. And he literally says, and he shows you how all of this is a language. So to address this specifically, I've just been influenced by that recently, is it explains everything. The collapsing of the waveform that we talked about a couple episodes ago is that our observation, and one of the things he said in his theory, which I thought was a really cool thing, was anytime you observe anything or put your attention to it, right? I'm interested.
hmm,
He said you are joining that thing in an event. And it was like he used the sense, you look up at the stars and you see that photon hit your eye. You actually are partnering with it in creation. And
yeah,
I thought it was so interesting because none of the physicists are approaching it this way. But he's like, you can't go or approach this without understanding that this is actually a language that has been spoken into existence.
yes,
And it's interesting to me. Um, Ray came to me the other day and he said his daughter is a percussionist and she's she's getting really good. And he was so blown away that the percussion teacher wanted to give her a gift because his friend had like some equipment and he had thought about her and he was tickled. He was so stunned that they would think of her, right? And I said to Ray, I said, hang on a second, Ray. Hang on a second. You're a teacher, you got a bunch of students. Think about how students are today. Your daughter is disciplined, she's interested, she practices, she's capable, and she's got a talent and a skill for it. She is dedicated herself to it, shown interest. Should it be a surprise in any way that he would think of her?
yeah,
And I thought about that as it relates to who God is. So, like you talk about being in the game.
yeah,
Well, do we manifest it or is it already there? Well, what does it say? It says, ask, seek, and knock. And you've talked about this like Zacchaeus climbed up a tree so he could
yeah,
see. And it's
yeah,
like, are you interested? Well, guess what? When I bother my neighbor, he ends up answering my question. And there's something about this efforting towards things. So we call it manifesting. We call it like, say it a million times in your head in front of the mirror and it'll become so. Well, in some respects, there's an element of creation that is actually true because you don't become a professional baseball player by sitting on the couch.
right.
Anyway, that's my response. What are your thoughts on that question?
No, that's great, Matt. Well, let's kind of check off the list because um, it's a language, and so in the beginning of time, order, and rank, the Elohim, form, fashion, and shape, his creation, the heavens and the earth. Okay. Well, then John says, in the beginning was the Word,
Yeah.
And what was the Word? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And there was nothing that has been created except by the Word. Okay, so that's kind of what this other gentleman is talking about. Then you go to the story of Babel. What happened in Babel? They decided that what they were going to do is somehow in their calculation, they thought there was enough material on the planet in order to build a tower that could reach all the way up into the heavens. So that caught the attention, okay, of Jehovah, who came down and said, I want to check this out, see what these boys are up to. So he came down, he checked it out, he looked at what they were doing, and he said, oh, very creative. There is not a single thing they will not be able to accomplish.
Mm.
Now think about that.
Wow.
If you want to get into the whole Elohim, you want to get into, well, what did the Elohim do? They formed, fashioned, and shaped his heavens and his earth. Out of what? Nothing was created apart from the Word. And this Word was a singular, unified language that communicated without deviation, without distortion, without any type of error, the perfect divine intention to produce something. And in this particular instance, the folks in Babel could accomplish anything that they set their mind to. Why? Because their language was still the language of heaven. It was unified.
Wow.
So what did Jehovah do? Let's throw a little confusion in there. Boom, he injects the confusion. What begins to happen? What was possible for them to achieve? All that was possible now became improbable. What did they have to be then aligned with? The Word. Okay, now, next thing. Sitting down, I'm in a laundromat many, many years ago. No, excuse me, not a laundromat. No, it was a laundromat. Sorry, it was. I was in a laundromat many, many, many billion years ago. And I'm looking outside the window while my clothes are cleaning. And I look out there and I notice all these things. And the Lord says to me, what do you see? And, it's amazing how you can look out through your eyes and not really recognize what you're seeing. So I started to pay attention. Oh, I see cars. Oh, I see a stoplight. Oh, I see a bicycle. Oh, I see a woman pulling, pushing a carriage with a baby in it. Oh, I see a man carrying a bag of groceries. Oh, I see. 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 All of a sudden, this incredible expanse of stuff, humans, activity, I'm starting to see. And I look at that, and then Jesus says to me, how did all that come to be? Is there anything that your eye has seen that did not come out of the earth? Well, nothing I can see. It all came out of the earth, right? And he says, okay, who put it in to the earth?
Wow.
Now I'm getting right to what Hornet UK 1 is talking about. He said, you could not have taken it out of the earth if I did not first put it in. And so everything that you are seeing with your eye, I foresaw in my creation. I made provision for it. And I'm just waiting for the one who is interested, back to that interest thing, to align with me in what I have produced and enabled you to manifest with me. And all of a sudden I saw the fullness of his creation right there. So that my input is, yeah, it's already been created. All things that have been created by the Word, And there is a point in time where man aligns himself with Jesus through hearing of the word, and together they partner to take that word and manifest it in the full intention of what God intended in the initial plan of his creation.
Let me
And
ask you a
so
question.
it's everywhere.
Okay, so I'm gonna build on that.
Okay.
So let's take two different people,
Okay.
right? Let's take you and Pilate. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to make this assumption about you that you're interested and you're
Okay.
listening. Okay. So
Okay.
you're someone who says, I know who this Jesus guy is, and I'm listening and interested. And maybe we don't take Pilate. Let's take somebody that doesn't know of Jesus at all.
Okay.
Okay. But they fashion something from the earth, right? Which so many people do, regardless of
Yeah.
whether they know or listen to Jesus. We've talked many times about how people are created for purposes and they will accomplish their purpose. And we've
Yeah.
even talked about that in terms of Satan himself.
Yeah.
Um, is there a possibility? Well, and I mean, I would think it's a high probability that there are people all across the world, across time, who have done things without connecting the dots, but were actually creating things that they were destined to create. Meaning, not that they were selfishly motivated or that they were detrimental or that they were quote unquote sinful, but that they were accomplishing what they, regardless of whether they connected the fact that the living Jesus spoke it, it appeared as something that they fashioned. You also would attribute that because it comes from the earth, like nothing exists. How do you how would you there's the intentionality of someone like you and me going, I want to hear, I want to only do what you say. I only live on these words. That's what I'm efforting towards.
Yeah.
But there are also other people out there that are being used in this system and they fashion and create things in some cases that are utilized in very significant ways. What is the difference between someone who is consciously knowing and listening and the person who also fashions?
What a great question. I mean, Whitney was really right. The Lord has really given you a great ability and skill to ask really thoughtful questions. That there's one thing about skimming a an issue. There's another to stop the rock and drop it in the center and say, let's take a closer look at this one. And you're doing that here. First of all, our the way that we're wired to work is we look at man first, and then we try to understand God through man, through
Yeah,
looking through the prism of man. And so we see these contradictions among men, and then we try to connect the dots with God through the filter of these contradictions among men. That's exactly upside down.
gotcha.
See? No. And by the way, I can take that it's the same thing happens with virtually any filter that we look through, including the scriptures. If you ever want to dive into that one, deep dive into that.
Okay.
It's exactly the opposite. It's looking, okay, God, how are you seeing this? How is it that you accomplish these astounding things on the earth through men who apparently have no interest in what you're doing?
Hmm.
How is it that you do that? Why is it that you do that? And how does that relate to the religious point of view, which says you don't work with men? And of course, I'm using that in generic terms, men and women. Um, you don't work with man except man is righteous and holy.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, because you don't understand who I am. Okay,
Okay.
I'm listening.
Hmm.
I'm interested. What kind of a supreme would I be? What kind of a creator would I be if I built my creation without purpose? And then if I built my creation with purpose, if you can agree that I built it with purpose, then what kind of a supreme would I be if that creation did not accomplish the purpose for which I created it?
Hmm.
If they didn't, then who would be supreme? Well, see, right away your head's starting to get wrecked right out of the
Yeah.
block, right? Because he knows exactly who he is. When I create a man, the man was his divine destiny was assigned to him before time ever began. So when he arrived on the scene and the time he was appointed, then there was a very specific intention for me creating him. And he has an assignment. Okay. And he will accomplish the purpose for which I created him. Why? Because he was created by my word. And my word does not return void to me, but it accomplishes the purpose for which I sent it. Oh, wow. Okay. Steve, do you need some examples? Yes, Lord, I would love one. How about Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar was given, and I'm mentioning this because anybody can look into the Bible story and read about him. Okay. Daniel was told to tell him that he was given assignment to rule the entire earth. Who do you think gave him that assignment? Did he know that I gave him that assignment? No. Did he care that I gave him that assignment? No. Did he still exercise his assignment? Yes. And he was so proud of himself that he built for himself a golden image because out of a dream that I gave him to illustrate to him that I had made him the head of all of the nations and that he was the head of gold. He goes, oh, wow, cool. I'll not only make a head of gold, I'll make an entire image of gold. And then when the musicians sound, then all of Babylon and all who are in the presence must bow down because after all, the God of heaven is the one who said that I'm the man. You know the story. And any who don't bow down, they're in trouble. And now we have the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and things of that nature. So Nebuchadnezzar keeps going down this path and keeps thinking he's one bad dude until one day he's walking around the top of his castle and he's looking at all that my hand has accomplished. And he's thinking, I am pretty cool. And then all of a sudden, there is the decree of the watchers who said, nope, it's now time for you to be recalibrated.
Yeah.
Okay? So that you actually understand how this all works. The result, there was the divine decree issued through the watchers that he would then become, as an animal grazing in the field for 7 years.
Wow.
As an animal, at the end of that 7 years, what happened to him? He was turned right side up.
Hmm.
And he said, yep, I now understand how this works. I now get it. That's the way the Supreme works.
Wow.
So, hey, we all have an assignment. We all do what we do. We may not be aware of it. We may not even know how we're doing it, but we're accomplishing a divine purpose.
Well, what an amazing question that Hornet UK1 asked, because it led to something that's tremendous, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say it back to you because this is so big. I think about Richard Hart when you say this, right?
Absolutely.
I think about Richard Hart, and then I think about, put your own self in the center of this, right? Think about it from your perspective of going, okay, if what Steve's saying is true, then since the beginning of time, there's an assignment. And that assignment isn't just what you would think of like, go do your homework, but that this is the story of your life, right? There's a purpose for you being here. Well, one, you have to kind of accept that. Wow. So actually, you really like intentionally have me here. This is not by accident that I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, whether I acknowledge or I'm interested in you, there is this kind of process and it will fulfill its purpose. So I think about Richard Hart, like
Yes.
Nebuchadnezzar or anyone or any of us, right? And I see, why do some people have a certain facility for percussion? Or why does somebody have this incredible IQ like Richard Hart? Why do they have this advocacy nature? Why do they have this drive for the glory, right? Why do they have you know, this, capability of earning and creating and architecting and strategic or whatever it may be. And you know what's so interesting? When it always comes back to the prodigal son.
Yeah.
Even Nebuchadnezzar himself, the fact that the watchers recalibrated, I love that term. It's almost like that's the universal story.
Yeah.
Is that this universal story is one of recalibration, that there is actually such mercy in that and patience in that, that there is an opportunity for recalibration because there could be just a removal.
Yes.
And to think that the father, when the son said, "Show me the money," and he's like, "All right, it will accomplish this." And I was talking to my son on the way to school this morning early, and I was asking him about the prodigal son story, and he told me what he knows about it. He said, "Isn't it interesting that the father would like pay for him to go do all this stuff and waste this money?" And to think that in the wisdom of the father, that he knew that his son would come to understand his nature and character. And to think, what is it, 7 years eating grass in the fields? What does it do to you? And what's so neat about this is, this is the story that we're so drawn to, like, is this story of redemption.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I studied theater in school and we really broke down story. And the elements of story are almost universal. And I often say it's about a man who wants something, and on his progress of going to get that, he discovers something greater, which is change, right?
Yes.
That in this process of I'm gonna go spend the money and do all this stuff, and dad, you can go, you know, and he finds himself eating with the pigs, and he's like, oh my gosh, maybe my father will let me, come to be a servant in this house. In reality, it was the means by which he understood his father's nature and character and then was given authority, which is really interesting.
Yes.
So that begs a big question, Steve.
Yeah.
Is there anything reserved and preserved? Because I think about well done, good and faithful servant. I also think about, hey, storing up your treasures in heaven. And I think about the older son
Yeah.
who understood his father's nature and character likely. What is the difference? Is there something set aside for those who actually do come out of their 7 years of eating or come out of the slop eating, understand and has been revealed the nature and character of the father who take seriously the authority and walk with him in partnership? It seems like, well, there's a peace that transcends all understanding. It guards your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. There's some benefit to it. Is there anything more to that? Like this idea, when I do come to this understanding of who he is, and I do understand this partnership, and I do understand, hold on, oh my goodness, there does seem to be something more in that ring of authority. There's something else. Help me understand that gap, because you're right. Like, well, then everyone they're going to fulfill their purpose here. But I also know that I can ride a motorcycle into a tree. Help me
Yeah.
think through how that stuff fits together.
Well, let's go back to Nebuchadnezzar for a moment. How did Nebuchadnezzar view his assignment on the planet after his experience in the field? Do you think he had a fullness of comprehension and appreciation and awareness? He was still doing the same thing, but what was the difference in the before and after in terms of his own awareness? The differences, the profoundness of it wasn't in the doing as much for him as it was in recognizing the contribution that that doing was making in his partnering with the God of all creation. There is an awareness that opens up to the fullness of what it is that you're actually participating in, that is part of that I came that your joy would be made full.
Mm.
There's a joy element, a profound element to it. There is an awareness that is so far beyond the ability to describe, that in the way Jesus mentioned it to me is, give a person a glimpse of my kingdom and you never have to motivate them again.
So is that the kingdom, Steve?
That is the kingdom. You are participating in the very construction and administration of the kingdom.
Okay.
You are literally participating in it in a conscious way. You're just not a builder, putting something together because that's an important element in the construct of what is being, built. It's that no, you're actually now seeing where that fits in the construct and the importance of it. Again, I point to to Nebuchadnezzar when he woke up. Go back and read that. Talk about a before and after. It was like, whoa, now I see. Same thing with Job, the experience of Job. I heard about the report of you before, but now I see you. Well, what do you think? Do you think he preferred to stay now knowing what he is saying? Do you think he'd say, nah, that's not such a good deal, I'll go back? No, no, man. Let's be in the game.
Yeah.
That's in the vocabulary of our sports deal. It's the participation in a conscious way in the construct and administration of the kingdom is the most exhilarating experience that a person can have in life, in my view and experience. There's nothing to compare to it.
Well,
absolutely nothing.
Taste and see that the Lord is good, right?
This
is, if you think about it.
And what do you have to do? You have to ingest it.
Yeah. You know what's so cool about that? Okay, so let's say, remember I used to talk about brisket and the smell of brisket?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, the heavens.
I watched you on a stream once.
Yeah. And you know what's so interesting about that? So let's take that analogy a little further, right? And of course, aromas are a big part of the scriptures too.
Yes.
But this idea that what is the indication that there's brisket cooking? Well, I mean, it's cool. Like I can smell the wood first, and then the meat starts to get, cooking, and I start smelling the combination of the two, and it's an indicator, right?
Yeah.
What I love about this thing, what you're saying though, it's interesting. It's like coming alive in a kind of technicolor way, is to say the odor, or in this case, the fragrance, is all around you. Yes. Right. And in some respects, you're like, even in the midst of the cesspool that we're in and all the decisions that we've made that have turned into reality that we live in, there's still a sweet aroma of this thing that is out there. And it's almost like, remember when Morpheus said, when you go to church and pay your taxes, you sense that it's there. But there's a difference between smelling it and tasting it.
Yes.
And it's interesting. It's like almost you don't have an appetite for it until that which is that you've been consuming has been removed. Like I really truly feel like I've been consuming the things that I've put to my mouth, which is my effort and my time and my energy. And I'm saying, I'm going to stuff myself with these things. I want my money. I want to go my own way. And then what ends up happening is you vomit this stuff out and you get to this point where you have an appetite for, and you can taste and see that the Lord is good. And it's really interesting. I never saw it that way until just now. And it's a strong analogy, I think, for this idea, because you've said it many times, and it's kind of cool because I'm hearing it again in my ear going, we could talk about this all you want, but if you're not interested and you're not interested in tasting it and, kind of seeking it out and going, where's the brisket coming from?
Yeah.
then we can describe it in very poor human terms.
Yes. Well, and the reality is that you get locked into the process and not into the reward of the process.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in the Western world, we're all technicians.
Yeah.
We are technocrats when it comes to, the Bible and spiritual things and, all of that stuff. I mean, we get all locked into the process. Okay, what is the process by which we collapse the waveform? How do we do that? And then what is the process by which? Well, okay, so I give you the concept, you connect with the concept, you even start doing the concept. Okay, now what? Is that it? Is there more? Is there something else? Well, see, looking in my own life, I was a guy that millions upon millions of people wish they could do. And I got a chance to do it. And in the middle of one of my pregame wind sprints, I'm in the middle of a brand new stadium looking at people, filtering in, a gorgeous, gorgeous day in a gorgeous ballpark with people streaming in like crazy, paying money to watch me do what I've been doing from the time I was 7 years old.
Playing a game.
Are you kidding me? And the only thing I could think of was, is this all there is?
Yep. Yes.
Is this it? This is what I've been wanting to do since I was 2 years old. This is it? And I wasn't looking at it critically. It was a genuine inquiry. Is this it? I thought, oh, well, and off I went.
Yeah.
And guess what? Jesus eventually answered the question. No, that's not it. I got more if you're interested. You interested?
I'm
You
interested.
want to hang with me? You want to go with me? I got guys I'd like to send. You interested? Boy, you bet. All right. 6 months
Wow.
later, I was out of the game.
Wow.
Just that quick. And never gave it another thought,
Wow.
which is miraculous in itself. If anybody has, unless ever hearing these streams, has been a part of that world, they know that no, that isn't how it works. Usually it takes decades for you to get it out of your system.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Nebuchadnezzar saw the essence of his assignment.
Yeah.
Because he saw the one who gave him the assignment, and the recalibration was complete. Same thing happened with Cyrus. The first one to be named, Jehovah's anointed, his Messiah. How is that? How is it that these two heathen kings, who were through the religious filter were the enemies of God and his people, how is it that God puts them in these positions, of incredible esteem? One is identified as the head of gold, who's given authority over the entire earth, all the nations of the earth, and the other is identified as God's first Messiah. How does that work? Well, Steve, it's because if you see it through my eyes, it's very clear and very plain. It's simple. And when you see it, it's profound. Are you interested? Man, there you go again. And off to the races. And so you're right. We've probably said that 1,000 times on, in our 29 streams, but that's the simplicity of it. And just, why do the Bezos of the world and all of those, why do they keep wanting to earn more money?
Yeah.
Why is there that drive to continue, to continue, to continue, to continue? What is it that's going on there? See, I think they're some of the least satisfied people on the planet. because they're not calibrated to the one who gave them that assignment. If they ever were calibrated, if they ever recognized and had the experience similar to Nebuchadnezzar, it would totally transform what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Wow.
So
Just dynamite. Well, let me bring it into the real practical everyday right now what I'm experiencing, because
sure.
here we are on a crypto channel, as I often say. And I met a guy who's in charge of it's the English Constitution Society, and they're the ones that are leading the English exit. So this is the country of England wanting to exit this British Union.
Yeah.
And of course, you've got the Scots that wanted to do that. And of course, we know about the Irish and the Northern Irish. And then, of course, the Welsh sit there and they're like, and it's interesting that here we are having opportunities, right? So this would be another tokenization of another, I mean, it's a nation. And it's interesting, this pathway. You're like, all right, I'm interested to know. He doesn't dump it on you all at once. I'm like, all right, we're journeying together in this. You're teaching me things as we go. You're redeeming things that I've done before. They're becoming relevant, right? Like fought the lion and the bear. Okay, these things are helpful, but I'm also learning new things every time I talk to you, and every time I do something, I'm kind of learning new things. I'm making decisions. Some are good, some are not so good. I'm trying to listen to Jesus, right? Trying to say, all right, only you have authority to speak to me, which has been incredibly valuable and powerful. But also seeing things heat up, right? Like seeing almost like, all right, yeah, the battle's not between flesh and blood. And boy, I'm seeing the picking is getting more sharp and more, it's like, all right, what are the ways in which you manage this? But here's the thing that I think is really interesting. If you kind of, take it seriously and say, okay, if this was all fashioned and created ahead of time, and there is an assignment, but you do have the ability to choose, but in the macro, in some respects, you don't. And I don't mean, I'm not trying to say we don't have free will. What I'm saying though is there's a more broad story, and that broad story will accomplish what is intended because his purposes are accomplished, even in the midst of all of the decisions that we make. It seems like, but I'm looking at the world right now, and I'm seeing more and more the clarity of what this calling long ago was. I didn't understand unlocking global generosity. What's locked? What gets unlocked? What are the keys? I don't even know the substrate in which this is sitting in. I don't know what door it is, but that's becoming more and more obvious. And it's probably very much more multifaceted than I even give it credit for. But it's interesting right now, the things that I'm seeing. And I've been listening to people, and you said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. I was listening to, there was a pretty significant interview happened yesterday between Russell Brand and Alex Jones. And I am no Alex Jones fan. Okay. And Russell Brand, I mean, I like him. He's anti-establishment, and these are all Gen Xers, so I'm a big fan of them. But it was really interesting. Here's Alex Jones talking about the Luciferians. So it's interesting. It's kind of entertaining, honestly. But it was really interesting. A guy that's not coming from the perspective that we're coming from, who's identifying that there is evil in the world. And he uses this term. He literally says, this is Luciferian. I think that's his handle for this is evil. It's real, and it's controlled by this, let's just call it the spirit of darkness. Not coming from really a Christian worldview, somewhat of one, but a really kind of bizarre one. He identifies that and says, this is real. And he's been talking about it for a long time. Now, you might not like the package it's delivered in, which I'm not a big fan of, but it seems like more and more people are recognizing that there's something else going on here, that this isn't just selfish people who want to amass some more money. That there's something much, much more nefarious going on. But we're seeing it now. And when I was a kid, I kind of think about my grandparents who, like, all they could see was the war film that was before the movie.
Yeah.
That's the news, right? Or maybe on television, I suppose, or radio. But now 24-hour news cycle, I can find it like real time on X. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which we can these things are being exposed. Everything from aliens to, past civilizations to all of this information. It seems like to me more and more people are seeing potentially what's really going on, but really in a macro sense, that there really is good and there really is evil and there really is a battle and that we are seeing it in this natural physical state and it's not the full picture. But there are those that are actually aligned with darkness and are being hosts for that, and that there is an agenda and there is a battle. You've talked about it. I think a lot of times people are like, in this corner, it's like George Foreman and then, smoking Joe Frazier or whatever in this corner, as if they're equals.
Yeah.
And so I would love for you to kind of break down for everyone. You've talked about the devil's on the run. What
Mhm.
is the state of affairs in this world as things, if Jesus, it's all been planned ahead of time, it was made for him and by him. There's a purpose, there's an assignment, all of these things. There is a trajectory to this thing because it is a
Yes.
story in time. How should we be viewing this exposure of a lot more of the realities of true evil intent and in the true nature of evil and good in this world and what our role is in that? I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, another great question. The simplest answer and quickest answer is that we're being readied for the exercise of our choice. It's very difficult to make a choice if you're not aware of the choice. You will make the choice, but can you hold a person accountable if they're not aware of the choice they're actually making?
Yeah.
See? So they may live the consequence of that choice, but living the consequence of the choice and being accountable of the choice are two very, very different matters. So the basic direct answer is that we're being readied to exercise our choice.
Okay.
Okay. And you see that examples of that throughout the scriptural story. Is there were certain times when there were choices to be made, and it was clearly put in front of the people, and then they exercised their choice. Probably the most, two of the most specific of those examples that we see is when Jehovah had Moses put Israel, split them between the two sides, then had them exercise their choice. Choose you this day whom you will serve.
Mm.
You have now seen it. We've moved from the concept to the experience to now the full reality of what you have been told. You are now standing here, and now the land has been secured. Exercise your choice. Are you going to serve Jehovah? Are you going to serve the gods of the land? Your choice. Now, so those choices, that's an example of at a national level with Israel, that Israel, there came a point at which I refer to it as calling for the question,
Mm-hmm.
where Jesus calls for the question. It's now time. Another example that's biblical picture is when Pilate stood Jesus and Barabbas up there and said, okay, folks, choose.
Yeah.
Fully aware of what was going on, saw for an extended period of time all the things that Jesus did, all the things he was talking about. Choose. Which do you prefer? Do you prefer the one who blessed and protect you, exercised his authority to bless and protect you, to describe to you um, the Father, his kingdom, invited you to participate in that, showed you how to do it, and then worked wonders among you that no other man had ever done? Or do you prefer the thief, the killer, the murderer? Which one do you prefer? And in the choice, you are also going to be given who is going to reign over you, who your king is going to be. We'll take Barabbas, the thief, the murderer, the killer. We'll take him, and we'll take Caesar as our king. That's our choice. You see, so these are very, very sobering things that happen, because you're now at that point where you have been fully ready to exercise your choice in a way that now establishes accountability. And so we are moving in that direction where these are going to become so plain, the issues are going to be so clear, that we are going to be called upon as individuals and as nations to exercise our choice. That, by the way, is why, in part, what you're doing with the Texas nationalist movement and your crypto and this stream and the whole thing about unlocking generosity, why this is so important, because you're playing a part in bringing into a point of clarity the things that we're going to need to be exercising choice over. Again, I'll give an example, and I'll go back into our own experience. Right? You've been talking more and more about the difference between the sovereigns, the true sovereigns, and the pseudo sovereigns, the hijack sovereigns. Today, the only ones who recognize themselves as sovereigns are nations.
Right.
And when I speak of nations, I'm speaking specifically of the governments of that body of people and that plot of dirt. The governments alone declare themselves as sovereign. And yet there's not a sovereign bone in them. And so for us, the choice is going to be, okay, I've told you who the sovereigns are. You're the sovereign. Who created the government? Since when is the thing created sovereign over the one who created it? Folks, no?
Never.
No? Not one time. Okay? Governments come and go, but the people remain. Why? Because they're the sovereigns.
Right. Right.
See, so these are the kinds of choices that we're being ready to make in a very real way. And before those choices can be made, the curtains have to be pulled back so you can see what the choices really are and what they entail.
Okay.
And so that's the short answer to where we are. And my recommendation would be, pay attention, folks.
Yeah.
See, pay attention. This stuff's getting very, very real. Pay attention.
Well, Academaciated, I think, asks a really good question that's aligned with this, which is, or is it all fate and every choice made is already written? And here's what's interesting. You just outlined this. Hey, there's a time for choosing.
Yeah.
And, you think about this idea of a transaction in the garden, right? The choices that we make. And you said the other day, and correct me with the right terminology, but the decisions are the seeds of what? Something reality?
Reality's harvest.
A reality's harvest. And, to think of, I jokingly said, you could drive a motorcycle into a tree, you could attack a nation and kill people and put them as hostages. There's a lot of different decisions that you can make, and there is a harvest you reap from those decisions. But there's also this kind of macro storyline and I think in investing, so Academaciated is always in the chat, and I appreciate him so much. It's almost like the people that do well in investing understand human psychology. Well, what is that? Well, that we make the same damn mistakes over and over again, and that you can kind of follow that cycle. So there's kind of almost, it seems like a macro and, intent and purpose, and you were created for that purpose. But there also does seem to be actually choosing that is actually ours to make. How would you square this one?
Yeah. This kind of goes back to interestingly enough, goes back to the filter through which we view things. Earlier, we talked about, looking at God through the filter of men and the behavior of men. We alluded to then and in the past that even happens when we look through the filter of the scriptures and then deal with God and the affairs of the earth through the filter of scriptures. And in every instance, there will be a distortion that will project a different reality or project an appearance of reality that's not a reality at all. And so let's just take just for fun, okay, or is it all fate and every choice made is already written? Well, then how is that a choice?
Yeah.
If by that statement it means that the choice is already made because it's been written, then the question would be, how is that actually a choice? Now, the other side of that would be, the question would be, well, just because the choice that will be made has been written, does that any the less make it a choice?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's go back to the Supreme. If the Supreme is, as we, have been taught, is all knowing, then can he know the choice without predetermining what that choice is?
Well, certainly.
Okay. And so can he record what that choice is going to be without violating the essence and properties of choice? Okay. So what I'm trying to describe here is not to get overly technical, but to say the prism through which you view things, which I have found that the only way I've been able to reconcile any of this stuff personally, that I then try to pass on to you folks, is by saying, okay, Jesus, how are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Okay. So
some insight. Yeah.
Yeah. So my feedback to um, Academaciated here is, hey man, that's a great question for Jesus.
Yeah.
Go ask him, how do you see this? Is it all fate? Okay, what do you mean by fate? Is fate something that is predetermined for which there can be no variation? Is that what we mean by fate? Okay, what is that? Okay. And every choice made is already written. Okay. If every choice is already written, what does that mean? Is that the writing of the choice to record it? Is that the writing of the choice to determine it? Well, if it's to determine it, then how is that actually a choice? And where does now fate and choice interact and participate in this thing? We talked a few sessions back, few episodes back, about the difference between the culture of the world and the culture of the kingdom. That the culture world is exclusive by nature, where the culture of the world is culture of the kingdom is inclusive by nature. And so how does that deal with? So inside the exclusive culture of the world that we operate in, this upside down world, contradictions, paradoxes, they don't reconcile. Even though we can observe them doing so often, we can't reconcile them in the way we think. Why? Because the upside down world is built to be exclusive by nature. And that exclusive component is what causes me to impose my will on somebody else, impose my thought process on somebody else, impose my conclusion and my belief system on other people. That's where that exclusive component comes into play. I'm right, you're wrong, I'm sorry. We
Yeah.
can agree to disagree. See, there's no reconciliation. On the other hand, in the kingdom of God, those things are perfectly reconcilable. Why? Because they fit into a macro picture where each individual has a different role to play, and so the perspective required to play that role is by its very nature and design different than somebody else who has a different role and assignment to play. Okay? So
Wow.
I don't know if I've answered
No,
anybody.
you have,
But
and there's follow-ups too. There's really interesting comments here.
awesome.
Hornet UK back again. I think the mind of God is almost unknowable, especially to us at this level. And he points out Isaiah 55. As for the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. You know what? We have this conversation. It seems like almost every time, Steve, is that we're so limited in the language we have. I was thinking about, what if somebody asked you, they're like, hey, tell me about Jesus, right? Or tell me about this thing. And you're like, and on one hand, taste and see that the Lord is good. What I love about you, Steve, is you always come back to home base, which is, all right. And this is illustrated in your conversation about the high places. Is this, we don't look up. No, we're going to sit with him. And I think when you say this word, what I see is, hey, Jesus, what do you think about this? How do you see this in a very practical way? You actually change your position.
Absolutely.
You find yourself sitting with him in this high place, looking down, and you're saying, all right, what insight do you have into this? These are the questions. And I think what's really interesting is we're so used to asking men.
Yeah.
And, you said it the other day. Well, you said it every time. You're like, well, name a person that you have a relationship with that you don't talk to. And to think as you cultivate this relationship, that the creator of the universe literally is just waiting for you to ask. And to think that you could have that kind of insight into big questions like, is it fate or is it already written? How do you see this? That's, and there's something really, you've been obviously practicing this for a long time. And it's such a cool thing because I don't have the words to articulate it. I think that's what Hornet UK is saying. It's like, I'm limited. Your ways are not my ways.
Well, right on. And that's exactly right. But see, what we've been taught is that is a barrier.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a barrier, it's an invitation.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, my ways are higher than your ways. My thoughts are higher than your thoughts. Man, I got things going on
that you
that
don't
you
know
have
about.
no clue about. Are you interested? Are you interested in knowing how to operate in my ways that are higher than your ways? Are you interested? Oh, by the way, isn't that exactly what he said to Jeremiah? Call upon me, ask me, make the inquiry, and I will show you things that your mind cannot even comprehend. I will set them right before you and to show you things that you did not even consider. Okay, man, I'm in. UK, let's do it, man.
That's so great. That's so great. Identity
Let's
blocks.
take him up on his word.
Thanks for stopping in, dude. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you know what I thought of?
What's that?
You talked about you were in what was it, summer ball? You're out of the country, South America or something like that.
Yeah,
and you said that there was Venezuela. You said there was this moment that you were a hitter, right? You went from being someone who hits to being a hitter. And so will you speak to this? Because there's something here that's really subtle. There's this active thing, which is like almost like I'm gonna practice this crab walk, practice this thing. Hey, Jesus, how do you see this? But then there's those moments where you're a hitter. And I think it's the same thing. I'll be honest with you. I think it's the same thing, or at least partly the same thing, is that we can have this active engagement of asking and looking for this. But then there are these moments where it is a profound, I guess the term I would use is revelation. You're something opens up that is new. It's related to what you'd been doing, right? You've been swinging that bat a lot, but you became the hitter. So is it fair to say this isn't just an audible Jesus saying, well, here's how I see it. It can also be a discovery of the greater thing or the next thing?
Well, yes. We are able to do what we do because it has been put into us to do that. And so we have the ability to do certain things. I'll give you an illustration in this, that's not my own hitting deal, but you said you spent a lot of times in theater and you learn about story. And Mike says to me the first time we talked, he's talking about the gifting that you have of being able to communicate and articulate things in an intelligent way. You hear that coming back to you all the time. So by engaging the activity that you were built to be able to perform, you begin to perfect your craft using that language. You get better at what you're doing. You perfect your craft through the constant practicing of that and the constant exercising that. You get better and better and better until one day Jesus says to you, "It's now time to speak. You are one whom I have called to speak." And now you're not just a talker. You're not just an interviewer. You're not just one who goes about and making things more simple to understand by restating what somebody else says. No, now there becomes a realization that I have been built and designed to speak. Whoa. And when that light, it's like a switch of a light goes on, and all of a sudden you start seeing that you are one with what you have been doing. The reason you've been able to do it is because that's what you've been built to do. And now I'm coming in to the full realization that I am actually a hitter. I just don't hit. I'm a hitter. And it's boom. It takes you to an entirely different level, both in your comprehension, the importance of who you are, the fruit of what the practice has produced, but more importantly, it tells you how you've been built and designed to work that was totally independent of you.
Yeah.
And you've come into it and you have become what you have been doing. And it's wow.
I don't really know how it works. I just know that it works.
Yeah,
Amen.
that's right.
Amen. I love it. I love that.
That's
I
right.
love it so much.
That's right.
Well, Steve, I really appreciate that. And it's you're not privy to the conversations I have about you when you're not around. But I was thinking about this story, right? What's been going on with me? And I met with a guy he's French and he lives outside of Geneva, and amazing guy, Hexican, Pulsican, Texan, my age, very accomplished professional, world traveler. And we were having this conversation, about, purpose and kind of alignment. And there's something I see happening. And I told him, I was like, I've been I've been aware of Jesus for 23 years.
Yeah.
I've been aware of this. I've recognized and I've seen and tasted the power, right? And I'm going to make a point on that power that, this weight lifted off of me years ago, and saw that it was real, right? It had to be like, I thought it was phony baloney until it was like tangible for me, real physical weight lifted and just like release.
Yeah.
And that got my attention. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then I was really interested, right? I dug in. And of course, and learned over time and everything. Honestly, Steve, since meeting you a year or so ago, I've had more understanding and development of what the true gospel is than in the previous 22 years.
Mm.
And it's it's not by accident, right? You think about this like, well, is it fate? Has it been planned out? Well, how amazing that you're making choices, right? They are seeds of, future harvest, right? This is this reality future. And it's interesting that these things will cross, right? And that there's, that God would say, hey, you're fulfilling the very purpose I made you to be. And when I met you that first time, I'm like, okay, like I was like, why am I attracted to this guy? This is awkward. Um,
The
and
beeline was
yeah,
pretty awkward. It's like, oh, this dude's coming over. Hey, okay.
it's like, well, and to have Jesus say, I was like, is he an angel? And you know what's interesting about that? I've really thought about that many times, and I tell everybody that story when I talk about you. But I was thinking about my own life, and I'm saying this just to say thank you to you for all that you've done for me. But the fulfillment of your purpose too is, for years and years, I was like, I go and sit in church and go, are you really doing it that way? That's kind of how I'm like, and I'm not judgmental. I'm like, that's great, but man, you missed an opportunity there. And so I would say to the Lord, I'd say, do you want me to preach the gospel? And he'd say, no. I mean, just imagine that,
Yeah.
right? Of what we learn in church and all that. No, you're supposed to be in season and out of season. Be ready. And I'm like, nope, nope. And I remember saying for years, I'm like, I want to share a real substantive message. I want to have actually something to say. And I think about the things that, I was student body president, you give your speeches or, talk to share the vision and the mission of the business and very, very satisfying. Get into crypto, talk about the Texan token, talk about Pulse Chain, all that kind of stuff. But it's like I've always been searching for what is this thing that I'm supposed to speak.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long ago, but you mentioned that you can probe these things that are true.
Yeah.
And I've been probing it. And it's only become more true.
Yeah.
And so I was at this conference this weekend, and a guy who did not come because of Texas independence, he came because Dr. Stephen Turley was there. And Stephen Turley he's like a theologian guy. He's now on YouTube. He's got like 1.2 million followers. He spoke at this event, and this guy just liked him, and he knew he was going to be in his town, and he showed up. Well, this guy was sold out Jesus follower.
Mm.
And of course, he heard me talking, and of course, I'm the leader of the Church of the Crypto Jesus, man. And he and I spent 2 hours, and it was like one of the greatest things, when you meet somebody and you're just like on the same page. But I just said to him, and he was talking about things, and it was funny. I found myself in your shoes.
Mm.
It's like, yep, I'm hearing the same things that Steve was like, hey, let's think about this a little differently. And I said to him, I said, there's so many voices, and there's so many distractions. There's so many that are trying to speak to us. And I said, my buddy Steve said to me one time, only Jesus has the authority to speak to me. And what is his nature and character? And the things that he speaks are out of his nature and character. And so I can identify and be able to understand the difference in lookalikes when something is speaking to me that is not him. And I'll say, you have no right to be here at this moment. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. And it was like it was a ton of bricks for him.
Mm.
And it was so meaningful. And of course, that's just evidence that as you probe it, it's more true, right? As you
Yes.
practice these things, you're like, oh, and this is true. And it's the purity of this story. So I got to tell you this. Like this, hopefully this makes your day. My brother turned 53 on the 12th. He struggled with a lot of things. He and I, you know, we're relatively close. But he converted Catholic when he got married years ago. And it's caused trouble between the family, not really between me, but because, my mom and all this stuff. So it's always been an issue. And of course, he kind of was raised, we went to the Baptist church when I was a kid. And then, he converted to Catholicism and became really anti Protestant just because, there was always this tension in the family. So we get to talking on his birthday, and he had talked about some things that happened in our lives that he had never shared with me before, which were very, when you let go of something that you've been
Mm,
harboring for a long time, and it was just a
yeah.
beautiful thing. His wife helped facilitate that. But then he asked this question. I thought it was wonderful. He goes, "Do you really think Jesus is alive and he speaks?" He did. He said that to me.
Yeah.
He's like, "Do you really think?" Because he tuned into one of our things last week
Mm,
or 2 weeks ago, and he said, "Do you really think like he's right here and that you can talk to him?" I said, "Yeah. Oh yeah." I said, "I don't hear him like I hear Ray talking to me every morning. I don't hear him like I talk to Steve. I'm so glad that Steve and Ray exist because he uses them too." But I said, "Yeah, I'm convinced of it." He's like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And I said, I mean, I didn't intentionally mean to say it, but I said, this is the problem that we've been dealing with for so long is that the church has told us that we were supposed to hate each other.
yeah.
And I said, what's amazing is we have the most important thing in common. And that is a recognition that Jesus is alive and he speaks. I said, there's nothing else. And Steve, all of the issues of the past went away.
Awesome. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was crazy. And it was not like, hey, let's make them go away. It was like they're gone.
Yeah.
And I literally said to him, I said, "You know what? I'm embarrassed in some respects because, the evangelical church has been so harsh to Catholics, for example." And I said, what's been amazing to me over this last year and hanging out with Steve is that when you get yourself rightly ordered to the fact that, hey, who are we in him? And what is his nature and character? That's what makes it good news for everyone.
Yes. Right on.
It's good news for everyone because it's his nature and character. There's no dissension, there's no disorder. And so, anyway, I wanted to share that with you because it was like, there's so much in this that as you continue to probe it and it continues to apply itself in so many different situations, it resonates even more. And then to see that kind of reconciliation, it's real evidence of it, right? Because that's really, I feel like it's where the rubber meets the road. It's like mending relationships is real powerful fruit.
Well, I mean, that's really right. And I do appreciate that immensely because and I shared this many, many years ago, early on with the Lord, that I am not interested in just being another parrot.
Yeah.
I'm just not interested. That is what I'm not interested. I'm interested in you. I'm interested in knowing you to the greatest degree possible. If there if there are any limitations at all in the earthly life, if there aren't, let's go full bore on this thing. That's what I'm interested. I'm interested in you. I'm not interested in just parroting another belief system. If it's not you, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
If it is you, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And so you're just describing how that's the way that it works. If you're interested, that's all that it takes. And he
Yeah.
takes care of the rest.
Well, and that's what's so cool. Yeah. My yoke is easy, my burden's light. Yeah. Well, okay. Thank you for doing that work. Carter Hill, your buddy and mine.
Yeah.
Truth evokes that emotional response resonating with what Jesus just said to you, Matt. Me too, brother. I've been in tears half this broadcast, and I know happy tears, certainly. But that's the thing that's so amazing is it's raw, but it's a safe rawness in the sense that you're not chafed, you're exposed in a good way. And I think, I imagine what heaven's like, Steve. And it's like this idea of being fully known and not having to watch your back, not
Yeah.
being fearful, but to be like, no, fully aligned, full purpose. And that it's a really interesting when you think about this kingdom. You said to me the other day, you said, do you think the kingdom was near when Jesus was here? Which I think is so great.
Mhm.
It's like, well, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think of thy kingdom come. I imagine,
Yeah.
New Jerusalem coming down and all this kind of stuff happening. But what I'm coming to realize is that actually we see these moments of the kingdom, all around us. And actually there's some sense of daisy chaining them together, right? With our
Yeah.
intentionality and our actions. How much of that is actually kind of the progress in your mind of how it does unfold? You mentioned, hey, we could make a decision in 30 days, we got it. Well, I do see it, when my wife's rocking the baby, right? Like there's a certain thing there. What do you think about that as far as like our independent decisions and all those things? Because we are seeing the elements of the kingdom come.
Well, yeah, you just described it with your brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carter just described it here. UK
Yeah.
was just describing it earlier. We see it all around us. It's just a matter of moving it from a religious concept to a life reality. And that might sound, quaint, but think about this for a second. In the Christian denomination, the last study I saw, um, there were like 42,000 Christian denominations.
Yeah.
A gentleman told me about a year later that there were 62,000. Now I don't know how they parse it out, you know, but the point is that virtually every single one of those denominations will quote what we call the Lord's Prayer. Your kingdom come, your will be done, as in heaven, so also in the earth. Okay? So, how many times do you think that has been prayed since since Jesus first uttered those words? How many times do you think they've been prayed?
It's got to be millions.
Okay? Millions upon millions of times. Okay, now let's go back. I send forth my word, it does not accomplish, it does not come back to me void, but it accomplishes the purpose for which I sent it. Your name is hallowed. We're about your kingdom coming. And how does your kingdom come? It comes when your will is done. Where is that done? It's done on the earth. How is it done on the earth? As in heaven.
Hmm.
Huh. How does that work in heaven? Got this conflict at work. Jesus, how does heaven deal with conflicts?
Now you're just giving away your secrets, Steve.
Right? I mean, well, think about this for a second. There's a lot of people hearing that say, well, wait a minute, they're not conflicts in heaven.
Hmm.
Oh, really? Take a look around you.
Hmm.
Any conflicts going on here? Any conflicts happening in the heavens? See, we think of conflicts as if they're difficult, as if there's something wrong with them. No, a conflict is perfectly accessible. You don't think that when we're building stuff in heaven that we're not going to come into some kind of a conflict,
Yeah.
whether it's a challenge that's difficult to overcome. Well, come and rule 10 cities with me.
Yeah. Why
Well,
would you have to rule them if there was no conflict?
see,
Yeah.
there's conflicts are not a problem.
Yeah.
See, it's
Y-
how the conflict is dealt with.
Yeah. In his
If the,
nature and character to bless and protect.
there you go. See,
Wow.
your will
I,
be done
yeah.
on earth as it is in heaven. See, so virtually every denomination has the seeds of what it needs
Yeah.
to simply turn this thing right side up in a millisecond. And
Hmm.
that's the thing that terrifies Satan and his kingdom more than anything else. Everybody on the planet is one decision away from totally dismantling his entire operation.
Yeah.
And it terrifies him.
I had a buddy say to me many times, you said a lot, he'd say, conflict is an opportunity for increased intimacy. And
Right
a
on.
really interesting, that, kind of secular idea, but this idea of reconciliation, I think about that, when I resolve with my wife or when, you think about I remember as a kid, right? I got in trouble fighting, when I was in elementary school and all that. Well, the kid that I punched in the face because he was picking on me, we end up becoming buddies.
Yeah.
And you think about it, it's like, well, that conflict is an opportunity for increased intimacy. It's interesting in my fundraising work that played itself out as well. Is that the people that were really upset, everyone would want to avoid that conflict. And we would say to them, no, no, no. Our coaching would be, no, you run after actually
Yep.
every opportunity. If anyone has actually been out of shape, they're actually thinking about you, they
Yeah.
actually care. And actually, the best thing that can happen is that you actually reconcile and remedy that because that's what builds stronger bonds. And it's interesting to think that that kind of physical healing, which would kind of reinforce the bone, is true in conflict. And that
Yes.
so many people desire to avoid conflict. And not that you embrace it just for the sake of fighting, but that you actually embrace it for the sake of the intimacy that it creates, following resolution.
Yeah.
It's huge
Yeah.
and powerful, and when people understand that, but I loved it though. I heard you talking there, and I'm like, Steve's giving away the secret to the whole thing. I thought about you. You talk about how you would consult with businesses a lot, and you told
Yeah.
that story about that guy who's like pulled you aside and took you to lunch, and he's like,
Yeah.
"All right, tell me what book you read. What do you got here?" It's so interesting is the simplicity of that application for anything that you're doing in life, right? And if
Absolutely.
you're leading a business or whatever it may be, and it's interesting. It's really, I mean, it takes a lot of courage, I think, for for you to say, "I don't know the answer," and that I'm going to seek the one who does, and to think that you would be, yeah, because we're so in this upside down world. We're like, you're supposed to be the strong one. You're supposed to be the one who knows everything. You're the one that has to have the answers and the solutions. It's interesting. You know, there's a lot of technological innovation that come out of Israel. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've noticed that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, I had a guy who worked in kind of tech in Israel. He said you'd be surprised how many people in that kind of space, those that are Jewish and, I mean, not just culturally, but religiously, actually embrace the idea of God given revelation.
Hmm.
And what's interesting, like Ray and I have dealt with this and we've seen this happen. Like, I don't know. And it's like some code issue, right? Like we've got a problem we don't know how to fix. And Ray's really big on this. He's like, all right, I know who knows. Let's ask him.
Yeah.
And for years and years, he's done that. He's like, all right. And I swear, like
Yep.
15 minutes later, you've got the answer.
Yes.
And it's so foreign. And it's like, and it seems so weird, I think a lot of people, but it takes a lot of courage to lead that way. But you get to see the fruit of that, and it's just more and more evidence. I think that's part of how I've tasted and seen that the Lord is good.
Well, there's this fascinating contradiction in the way we approach things. I mean, think about this. I know you use the term, I use the term. It's we're wanting to be practical.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the practical application of this? What is now that we've dealt with all of this, spiritual, weird stuff out there.
Yeah.
That's fun to think about, fun concepts. Wow, might even blow my mind a little bit. But now I got to get back to the practical stuff.
Let's
Okay?
get down to business.
Yeah, right on. Well, what's more practical than going to the guy that built the daggone thing? I mean, that's the realization that I came to at one
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
I mean, I started reading books and I was just parroting the hype of the day.
Yeah.
And, it didn't take long for me to start realizing how many times I was contradicting myself because I was reading all the in know periodicals and all of that stuff, thinking, man, I had the vocabulary down. I was really starting to think I was smart, and other people start thinking I was smart. Didn't have a flipping clue what I was talking about. But what I realized is that I was just parroting what somebody else was saying without having a clue if it actually made any sense.
Yeah.
And finally, I said one day, why am I doing this? Jesus, if you said, call upon you and you'd answer, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take you up on it. You built this stuff. Would you teach me how you see business and how you operate business? Would you show me what that looks like to you and why you implemented it? Why does it even exist? There's nothing that exists that has not been created apart from you. So why did you build this? What did you have in mind when you did that? I'm telling you what, he's got a very interesting answer,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's worth asking him about it because he has an entirely different point of view on the thing.
Well, and it reminds me, Hebrews 11, without faith, it's impossible to please God because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists
Yeah.
and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And I was thinking, it's so, think about something that's so practical. Well, in order to do this, you kind of got to believe that he's real. And it's funny that it's that literal. Like, well, you
Yep.
kind of have
Yep.
to, if you're going to do this, you kind of have to acknowledge the fact that, he created it all. You have to, and that he's going to reward those that earnestly seek him. But that concept of earnestly seeking him,
Yeah.
I mean, hey, are you interested?
Yeah.
And I forgot to tell you this, but I think one of the things that was really big in the resolution with my brother was I said, we were talking about the word church, and what is the church and all of this conflict that's happened between he and I and really the family, not as much he and I, it's been around. And I said, this word, that they used for church, the ecclesia, what was it? And it's so interesting. I just said to him, I said, and I told him that story about the agricultural story, right? And those that kind of chased after him and said, hey, what'd you mean by this? And what's funny is you're doing exactly that same thing. You're just saying, I don't really get this. And I know you got more to this story. How do you see this? And if you think about it, those people that followed him after that story, that's really all they were asking. He's like,
Yes.
hey, what did you
Yes.
mean by this? How do you see this? And he says, because you've done this, I'm going to share that with you. And it's interesting that our interest and our effort actually plays into this.
Yes.
It's fundamental.
Okay, you've run businesses. Do you want people working for you that don't have an interest in your business?
Yeah. I've had them.
That's right. And how long does it take you to recognize that they're not interested in your business?
Not long.
About 15 to 30 minutes and
Yep.
Of course, that's an exaggeration, but the point is it does not take long to find those who are not really interested in your business and the well-being of your business, that is there to provide a service not only to the customers and the suppliers, but also to the people who work there. This thing is holistic in its nature.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about all the time the blessing of unlocking, global generosity. Well, let me ask you, is there generosity in heaven? Is there anybody up there talking about we need to unlock generosity? No, it's just there.
Yeah, it just is.
It just is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
See? So, okay, if we are supposed to, your kingdom come, your will be done as in heaven, so also in the earth. If generosity is just there, it just exists, then what is it that's locking it up so it doesn't just exist here?
Yeah.
Okay? So what's happening? You're being assigned to bring a part of heaven in its operation into the earth. And so what is required? By the way, if it's locked up, what does that also mean? It's already here.
Wow. What, that's the feeding of the 5,000, man.
Yep.
Wow.
It's already here.
Yeah.
It's being locked up. I told you I was going to give you the keys.
Yeah.
So the keys are also there.
It's interesting that the keys to the kingdom, it's amazing, this unlocking. It reminds me of, the early church in Acts 2, 42-ish. And it's interesting how they, they committed themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the breaking of bread, um, fellowship, and they ate together, they prayed together, what's interesting is, I think it's 45. It says, if anyone had a need, people would sell stuff and help them out. And it's really interesting, because people have kind of looked at it and like, that's socialism in the Bible, or that's communism in the Bible. And we've talked about how generosity, it ceases to be generosity if it's mandated, right? It
Yeah.
has to be out of the heart, right? But it's interesting to see what was the results of these people living in community, understanding and acknowledging, and sharing life together in community. What was the result of that? Well, they were sensitive to other people. That's just real practical, and it's interesting
Yeah.
about this community too. Is like, not that you help everybody, or that you're, but that you're sensitive to others in addition to yourself. And that's, I guess, the essence of community, right? But there's an unlocking in that. And I think, one of the most powerful things about what I've learned from you is this bless and protect in his nature and character.
Yeah.
That in and of itself, like understanding, okay, prodigal son comes back. He's amazed that his father would come back and, kiss him on the neck and put a robe on him. But I'm always fascinated by that signet ring he gives him. He's like, now you know who I am. You
Yes.
know my nature and character. And I was talking to my son today. I said, what is a signet ring? And he's barely like stick with me in the conversation. I'm like, and I handed him my ring and I said, back in the day, this is where signature comes from. You'd press this into the wax to seal up the message, so you knew that somebody didn't read it. It was official. And it's like that impression, the father gave the son that his authority. And if you figure, when you get the ring of authority, you are his impression. And you're
Yes.
given the ability to act basically in his nature and character. But the assumption is that you know what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's so, like, to me, the feeding of the prodigal son story, it's almost as if that's the only story. And everything else is like a derivative story. It's the same story over and over and over again.
Yes.
That you would understand, and this going of your own way is this process in the genius of your choice making, that I would let you exhaust yourself in yourself, so that
Yeah.
you would then understand who I am, and that what comes with that. And that's the thing that's such a promise to me, is like, all right, if I'm called to bless and protect in your nature and character, well, then authority is such a big, big part of all this. Will you talk about the difference between, you talked about it before, but will you camp out on the difference between authority and power?
Yeah. Sure enough. Um, okay, let's kind of complete the circle for the
Yeah,
prodigal son because it's so
yeah,
powerful. Um, it's fascinating how the Lord will really focus us on something because that's the thing he really wants to emphasize. But in that same story, there are 1,000 other things to be learned about it. In this particular story, um, one of those new storylines is that there is an alternative. Okay, we've learned about the father's house. We learned that there's a family. So I got a brother. We learned that I've worked and that is an incredibly prosperous house that he lives in. So much so that he can give me my inheritance at my request when I'm of age, and he will finance my debauchery. He will allow me to experience the full fruit. Decisions are the seeds of reality's harvest, the full fruit and harvest of my decision to exercise my exercise my choice to seek an alternative house to live
mm,
in.
yep,
Okay. So what did he do? He took the resources of the father, represented in his inheritance, to finance living in an alternative world. So what was existing in that alternative world? Oh, it was a place of extraction. It wasn't a place of production. It was a place of extraction. As I extracted from my father through the mechanism of giving and generosity of my father, so I took it and transferred into this world that of extraction. And all of a sudden, all of the resources that were resident in my father's house are now being confiscated by this alternative world. And what did this alternative world do for me in exchange? It fed me slop. Okay. Wow. It took all my money in exchange for pleasure. The end of that harvest was I'm sitting with pigs, eating their slop, and seeing that state in comparison to my father's house.
Yeah.
And not the goodness of my father's house and where I resided as a son, but in how my father even treats his slaves better than what I'm experiencing here. So he's now seeing the full comparison of what exists in his father's house and the way his father built his creation to work with how the alternative operated. And he said, I'm going back to my dad's house. So he goes back there. And what does he learn? He learns that what he receives is the openness of his father who runs after him and has now been given authority. Well, what was he given in the form of his inheritance? Power. He was given power to do what he wanted or what he thought he wanted. But what happens when it's expended?
It's gone.
It's gone. And so he had all the power he needed until he expended all the power. And when he expended all the power, he saw what the source of that power was, which was evil. And what is evil? Operating apart from the Father. So power that he was experiencing was the power to be able to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish in the way he wanted to accomplish it, when he wanted to accomplish. But what he realized is once he expended that power, it was gone. And when it was gone, both what he saw when he saw in that is what he lacked was authority. How did he know that? Because he was given slop to feed pigs in exchange for a pence. So where he was a king, now he's a slave. Why? Because he has no authority. He had power, he had no authority. Now, once he came back, what did the Father give him? Authority. Why did he now give him authority? Because he got a chance to see the difference between power and authority. The exercise of his choice apart from his Father, as opposed to exercising authority with his Father. And now the circle starts to be completed. Listen, we have all the power you could ever want in this world. And what's the produce of that power? We have this astounding amount of technology that is enabling us to produce things and ease of living, an efficiency of communication. And what is it doing? It's producing rot. It is producing the fullness of the rot that is utilizing it. I mean, isn't that what we're looking at? What power do we lack to change this thing, turn this thing right side up? We don't lack power. What we lack is authority. See? Now, let's take the two together. Authority is that which remains, where power is that which is expended. And once power is expended, it reveals the source that released the power. Okay? And when it reveals the source of the one that released the power, then it reveals the authority under which that power was then being released. Is it an authority? Is that power being released to bless and protect, or is that power being released to exploit and extract?
Yeah.
Okay? And now you see, so now you go and you go, wait a minute, under what authority is this now operating to extract and exploit? What authority is that? What nature and character is operating there? Is that the authority of our hallowed Father, whose name is more hallowed than all others, whose nature and character is truth, who is represented, documented as being love? Is that the nature and character that's being operated there? No. Well, then, whose authority is being utilized to produce the release of that authority, of that power? Man, that's not God. Whose authority is being used to release that? Oh, mine. How is my authority being utilized? To serve my own interests. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to end up eating slop at the end of this whole thing.
Wow.
So this authority thing and power thing is very, very significant, because we think power is the end all.
Yeah.
No, power is what is the temporary fix. It's the thing that is released, and in its release, I'm repeating myself, but what its greatest use is, it will tell you which authority is at work that's releasing that power. And at that moment, you can look back and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not sure I want to do that. Because now, going back to the prodigal son, what is the outcome of that if I'm not careful? I'm going to end up eating slop. Nope, I think I better rethink this. So, I've used a lot of words to describe things about power and authority. But what God's intention is to complete his decree that his man would rule his creation with him in the fullness of his nature and character. Before we can rule what is outside, we have to learn to rule what is inside. And what is inside is how we are going to utilize the power that we've been given to make our authority effective. In the story of the prodigal son, he used it, the authority to claim his inheritance, he used it to serve his own interests. And the father said, you need to learn that the outcome of that is not only the extermination of your power and the extraction of your power, but more importantly, the reduction of your authority to reduce you to a slave. If you don't understand that, you'll never know what it is to wear the signet ring. You'll never be in a position to rule in my nature and character. And that's what the prodigal son learned. He learned the totality of this whole thing in one story. So learning how authority works and what it's about is where it all starts, because that's the objective. Power is temporary, authority is eternal.
So, okay. So here's an observation to take it even a step further. There's a house and a father of the house, and his authority that has not been given to the son yet produces wealth and blesses and protects, right? It's the source of his inheritance.
Yes.
That source is under the authority of the father.
Yes.
And it is, theoretically in this story, unending. And it's interesting that you talk about that inheritance is a finite thing. You've asked for it, you've been given it, it has been expended, and now you're back.
Yes.
And it's interesting to think that this constant left-hand side of the slide thing
Yeah.
of constant exhaustion of and coming back to the same well, the same cycle of power to get more and to get more. But also, I think back to what kind of my first revelation with you, which was Eve's transaction with the serpent. You know,
Yeah.
this idea giving your authority away. And it's interesting that enslavement comes with that transaction, you know,
Yes.
and I think that, you know, I use this term kind of flippantly, like, well, only you have the authority to speak to me. Under whose authority? Well, in a way, and it's so common. Like, why would I become a slave to Christ? Like, why would I actually be a slave to Jesus? It's interesting. You can't serve two masters. You can't serve money, and you know, it's really interesting to think that. And what a great counterintuitive thing is that the only one authority you come underneath is the one who has given you ultimately the mission, right? To rule and to reign in his nature and character, to bless and protect. And it's like, okay, when all those things kind of line up, and it's interesting, like this process of learning this, well, you can't be my agent with my signature and be my impression if you don't reflect my nature and character. You're not me. You don't have it.
That's it. You have my resources. You don't have me.
Wow. Well, and then you said earlier, you know, nothing that exists didn't come out of the earth.
Yeah.
Even yourself, you're made out of dust and you'll
Yeah.
return to it. Isn't that interesting? You know, I was thinking, I love woodworking and love all this stuff. You know, yeah, gross, cut it down and kind of shape it and you make it into something. And everything is a function of some raw material that came out of the earth. It's amazing when you think about that in its completion, you know, wow, 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 it's all going to return. And then you think about it, like, well, what's the purpose? Well, he told us flat out what the purpose was. You would rule and reign with me in my nature and character. And you think about,
Well,
well, that's how the kingdom comes.
that's exactly how it comes. I mean, now let's connect that to you brought up the left side of the slide.
Yeah.
Okay. There's this little statement that Paul makes in Galatians where he says, while the child is an heir, he does not differ at all from a slave, even though he is owner of everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's take this back to the prodigal son authority power issue. The heir has the authority to claim that portion that he owns. Okay, so every heir has the authority to claim that portion that he owns. So the prodigal said, I want my portion. And the father said, you have the authority to request that. I will grant it. Gives it. How does he utilize his authority? He goes to the left side of the slide.
Yeah.
When he goes on the left side of the slide, what does the left side of the slide do? The left side of the slide, the ones who are ruling, they don't have the authority to use those resources. They don't have the authority to produce those resources. They are not heirs to the resources. So where do they go to get the resources? To the heirs.
Yeah. Wow.
And which heirs are they going to? Those who will submit themselves, who will do what they ask them to do, to expend their resources to accomplish their own objectives, which they think are their own objectives. Do you think the prodigal thought that his game plan was to end up in the pig pen?
No.
No, that wasn't his game plan. But that's where he ended up. So on the left side of the slide, the way that it works is the spiritual forces of darkness have to get the heirs to exercise their authority to expend their resources on the left side of the slide to do what they think is to accomplish their own objectives. And when they do that, they turn that what occurs on the left side of the slide is this transaction agreement.
Yeah.
Where they agree to come under the rule of those spiritual forces, who then hijack their authority, and in hijacking their authority, confiscate their resources. And it's all finite.
Yeah.
And it completes the cycle. So how do you cut off the left side of the slide? You say, hey man, I'm going back to my father's house.
Yeah.
And I'm going to transfer from my authority to his authority. Now, prodigal son didn't know he was doing that. He just wanted, to go back into the safety, if you will, of his father, the nature and character that ruled his father's house, where even the slaves were higher in stature and importance than he was in the left side of the slide. But it required intention. Now, remember we talked about on the left side of the slide, there is an intention to push resources to the right side of the slide. Well, isn't that what the young boy did?
Mm-hmm.
Did he not push now he did it in the form of giving, but he was pushing it from the family into the kingdom until eventually what happened? In the way that you described, all of a sudden people started revealing what they had. And what did the right side of the slide then do? Started drawing.
Yeah, drawing.
Started drawing. Just because one pushed.
12 basketfuls left over.
Yeah. See, so these things are all connected.
Yeah.
In profound ways. But it begins with authority. And the authority, we all possess authority as an heir. The objective is for that authority to transition from the authority of an heir to the Father's authority. That's exercised in the fullness of his nature and character. That's his vision. I think that's pretty daggone profound myself.
I think this is an AP course. This is an advanced placement course. And if you had a mic, you ought to drop it right now. Wow. Folks, if you understand what just happened here, this is important to share with others. It really is. I think I learned more in this 2 hours than I learned in 20 years. And folks, it's a constant reminder that we got to be reminding ourselves, because like that's the simplicity of it all, right? You like took this all the way around, and how amazing it is. Well, what is this? Taste and see that the Lord is good. But the practice of that is the greatest adventure you will ever experience. And and I feel like I'm coming into it. Like I've been being prepared. I knew something was coming. I knew something was there, but I feel like it's like, all right, it's go time, right? Like cross the chalk. We're in the game. And it's like, Steve, thanks for helping me be equipped to take a fastball to the chin. Chin music. Dude, thank you so much for this. We've done another 2 hours, 29 episodes.
Too fun.
I'm
having fun. I hope you are too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, I like my mind being blown. It's really awesome. Well, I hope it's been a benefit to those that have watched or that will rewatch. But Steve, thanks so much for another Friday, and have a great weekend. Thank you, sir. Same to you. Have a great weekend, folks. Take care, everybody. Wow. It's amazing. I've talked about how I want to like document this stuff. That last hour there is really, really important. And, I feel like the habit of just talking about this, I see something new in it every time, right? A new facet of it, something, I turn it and it sparkles and I'm like, oh, there's something new there. I think that's a big part of this whole thing, is that this constant reminder. We need to be around people who are reminding us, to stay, to remind us, right? We need to. We easily forget. And so I'm so thankful for Steve, and hopefully you are as well. But we'll be back again. We got to do 30 of these, right? You got to at least do 30. We're also considering doing some things that are more thematic. And I'm looking at, taking a lot of this content also, and you know, parsing it differently. But folks, I'm just really thankful. I checked on the other channel, and it's so encouraging because all I see on my screen is crypto heartbeat. I don't see what's going on through Christians and crypto. And I looked at that. I haven't looked at that channel in for a long time, and it's grown considerably. And then there are people who watch over there as well. So thank you so much for doing that. We will catch you next time. But this is exciting. This is exciting. Don't let your hearts be troubled, and do not mess with Texas. Take care, everybody. See you.